Hello, everyone. Merry Christmas. I'm so happy to be here with Sal Cordova. He's going to share just a really special message tonight. And we're going to honor his parents, but also just he's going to talk about how it relates to the gospel. Thank you for being here, Sal.
Thank you. And the message has changed a little bit. The
Okay.
Lord laid on my heart, I need to give more proportion to covering his story, and it'll make my parents' story more understandable. So at first, when I was putting this together, it was going to be 50%, 60% about my mother and father. And I realized, if I tell the gospel, it'll make my parents' story clearer. And so maybe it might be only 20%, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord laid on my heart that if you talk about Jesus, you can't go wrong. And I was just fumbling through my dad's diaries, which were beautiful. It was kind of an emotional experience for me because there are things that I have not known until this point in my life about his story. Um, so it's going to be a little bit different than uh, what it's billed to be. I don't know how, at first I was like, Lord, I'm not going to be able to fill out the program, but now I have like 3 hours of material. So we'll just cut it down. We'll just play it by ear. We'll try to have a good time and
Okay.
honor the Lord. And
Cool.
um, I think you've been a good influence on me because you like to sweet talk. I like to trash talk. And I said, okay, you got to serve Rebecca's channel because she is so kind to host this. And I'm going to try to my best to behave myself. I'm not going to look at the comment section, no matter what nasty things they say. I'm just going to
Cool.
ignore it because I know some people really don't like me. And for those who don't like me, Merry Christmas.
So, do you want to still sing? We were going to sing a song. Do you want to do
Yes,
that? Okay,
yes.
do you want to sing your solo or you want to just sing one together?
I'll sing my solo because I think I remember my pitch is not really quite where it used to be.
Okay,
Um,
go for it.
Now, I used to sing at events 20 years ago. And of course, you have all the nice audio equipment to kind of make your voice sound better. And you have the orchestra. I don't have any of that. And I don't have like a year of 1 or 2 years of my voice coach kind of helping me along. For those of you who are not familiar with my story, I was a music student before I degenerated into an engineer and scientist. No, that's a joke, guys. Being an engineer and scientist is a great profession. I'm just saying that conveying how heartbroken I was to have to go try to make a living in disciplines that didn't quite fit my personality. I took a personality test. It's like, yes, I'm not quite there. And people have been concerned that I'd struggle, and I did. So this is a secular song, and I'd sung it actually at an office party and also at all sorts of parties 20 years ago. So this is not me at my prime 20 years ago. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Let your heart be light. From now on, our troubles will be out of sight. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide say, from now on, our troubles will be miles away. Here we are as in olden days, happy golden days of yore. Faithful friends who are dear to us, gather near to us once more. Through the years we all will be together as the Lord allows. Hang a shining star upon the highest bough, and have yourself a merry little Christmas now.
Awesome. And I hope it doesn't really trouble anyone. We want to sing another song, and I just hope like the viewers don't go down, like what is going on here? All they're doing is singing. Okay, we want to sing Hark the Herald Angels Sing. So I'm going to do my best. We have not practiced this at all.
Okay, this is what a rehearsal sounds like, guys.
Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild. Am I singing too high for you? Too low?
Just a little bit too high. No. Actually, just keep going. I think I'm going to give you a real...
God and sinners reconciled. Joyful all ye nations rise. Join the triumph of the skies. With angelic hosts proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Wow. I think that was as awful as the last time we tried to sing together without rehearsing. One of these days we're going to have to rehearse.
We made a joyful noise to the Lord.
Yes. And I am so happy. I love Christmas. And so I love Christmas songs. So anyway, let's get started with.
Well, if it puts you in a good mood, hey, it put me in a good mood just to sing. And maybe we'll encourage other people to sing. Because I learned being a musician, you have to hit a lot of wrong notes before you get the right notes. So anyway, I need to go grab some Kleenex. If I could share this is actually going to pertain to, let me explain what I'm doing here tonight. And it's been a long project of mine. I've been trying to understand romantic love and Christian love, because in the church, traditionally, it's been frowned. Romantic love was considered kind of, at best, not, depending on the tradition. Like the Catholic tradition, it's like, well, if you're married, you can lust after your wife, and just like, that doesn't make sense. But I mean, that gives the attitude that if you have kind of like those kind of feelings for someone you're married to, that's sinful. And like, I don't know. I mean, as I studied the Bible, it's like, that's not exactly what the Bible teaches, because there's some Proverbs, and then you have the Song of Solomon. And we look at our culture today, and love between human people is celebrated. And it's like, well, is that really of the Lord? And I've come to think of it, I said, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. It's, like a photograph, it's not the real thing, but it still conveys something of the real thing. And this kind of came to the fore when I knew someone from Cyprus. She's Greek. And she would refer to her husband as agape moi. Agape, my love. And the Christians treat agape as if it's a very special kind of love that's, pure and only to God. And if you actually read the Greek, like the love of money, it'll say agape. So it's not like, it is in a sense the way that we use the word love in English. So when it says in the Gospels, they loved the approval of men more than the approval of God. They loved the approval of men. It's the same root word, agape.
Yep. That's a misconception a lot of people have. Yeah.
So the way to look at it is maybe in the Garden of Eden, the love that Adam presumably had for Eve and vice versa. It's a picture, and one that's blessed of God, that illustrates God's love of his people. And that theme will come out through this talk. So, when if you just turn on, I haven't been turning on the radio a lot. I don't like the current day music. Sorry to offend you guys. I just don't really. Rap I'll listen to it just a little bit, but not that much. But when I was growing up, all the songs were just all these love songs, and the guys, pouring out how much someone is fulfilling them. I remember John Denver singing, "You fill up my senses."
Yes.
Oh, you sing it. You sing it.
No, we.
Okay. Now I shouldn't laugh. This is actually kind of sad. That song was inspired by his love for his wife. Of course, then they divorced. He actually took a chainsaw and just cut their bed in half. He's so done with this. But did what he felt in his heart at the moment he sung it, was that pure and beautiful? And I'd say, actually, yeah. We live in a corrupted world. So some of the pictures of how love should have been in Eden have been corrupted. And so, it always fascinated me. I'd hear these artists write these beautiful love songs or sing them. And I said, they must be in the most wonderful relationship. And you just read, and it's actually not. And I'm like, how does that make sense? And I realized, when we were cast out of the Garden of Eden, in our genes is still kind of a picture of what we long for. And we're trying to recreate it, but God put a cherub to guard us from going back to Eden. The way to go back to paradise actually is going to be a new paradise. We can't go back to the old paradise. We have to go to the new one, and we have to go through the cross to get there. And
as you're going to go get... No, I just wanted to say, you're getting ready to talk about romantic love between humans and between the Lord and us. But I just want the people watching to know a little bit about you. And, you've been single. You have waited for romantic love. And part of the reason that you were waiting is because you've sacrificed yourself to care for your mother. For 18 years, Sal cared for his widowed mother. And so even though I'm sure that you've greatly desired to have a wife and to experience that romantic love, you have also honored your mother and taken care of her and kind of put your own things to the side. Did you want to respond?
Oh my goodness, that's so kind of you to say that. I was nearly married a couple times. I've offered a couple proposals. One was rejected, one was accepted, and then I changed my mind. I've had my heart broken many times, and sadly, I think I've broken a few along the way myself. And things just don't work out. With regard to my mom, just before Dad died, and I thought I was going to get married. There were a few girls that seemed to show interest in me, and some of them were my singing partners because you could tell I loved to sing, and that's kind of how I got to meet some of them. But there was one who she'd be calling me up, and I think I doubt she'll be watching this, but she'll know who she is if I mention it, the details. One time I was out, I was good friends with her boyfriend. I knew him actually before I met her. But one night we were out, and I was just talking about, how I lost my tennis partner because she went back to school. And when I mentioned that, her eyes lit up. I was thinking, please don't look at me that way. She said, "You play tennis?" And she said, "Let's go play," right in front of her boyfriend. I just like, don't do this to me. This is so embarrassing. I didn't want to betray my good friend. Well, a few days later, I hear that they broke up, and I had this message on my phone. She wants to go play tennis with me. So I said yes. And she said, Sal, let's go play tennis after church. Why don't you pick me up and we can go to church together? So she was really, we never were an item, but I was very flattered because to me, she was the most beautiful girl in McLean Bible. And that's a big church. And a lot of the guys were always, if they were going to have a date, they wanted it with her. But, and I don't know why she picked me. There are many fine guys, but I was just like, Lord, I'm grateful for the attention. I don't think this is going to work out. I just had that feeling. I said, we'll just be friends. And, when, I take her out to dinner and we go out shopping for clothes. Oh my goodness, this girl loved clothes. So she would always pick out what clothes she wanted me to wear. And, I spent thousands of dollars. She said, Sal, try this. And she'd just be giggling and we just have a good time at the clothing stores. And I do have a funny story. Can I tell a funny story about that?
Yeah, I'm just afraid that we're going to get so far off track. We're not going to get to the 3
See,
hours
you brought up my personal love. Like, no, I'm not going to stop talking about it. But anyway, she outfitted me in this orange shirt. She didn't like me saying it's orange. She said, it's coral. I said, Allison, this shirt's really feminine. Don't make me wear that. She said, trust me, Sal. It looks very good on you. So she took me I finally wore it going to church. I think I only wore it once because I would not wear that. It's kind of a pinkish orange. And it has a certain texture. And she is getting all her girlfriends and saying, hey, look what Sal's wearing. And they all approached me and they started grabbing. They said, they started grabbing like my sleeves and then rubbing their hands all over my back and my chest. They said, that's a really nice texture. And she was just looking straight at me and laughing. She said, I told you, Sal. Okay, that was her. And so one night we were driving around and she's saying, Sal, where would you like to live when you get married? And she's just looking around, had kind of a little bit stars in her eyes. And I said, I don't know. They're kind of like, she said, do you like this area? She asked me. I said, yeah. And she asked me, how many kids do you want to have? And I was like, I didn't know what to say. I said 3. She said 4 or something like that. So anyway, but I didn't feel the Lord had that. Something just didn't work out. And I ended up, I said, the next guy she meets is going to be her husband. And that was the case. My dad died just a few months later. And so I ended up caring for my widowed mother for 18 years. Now, people will ask, well, you could have still gotten married. And so this is actually, Rebecca's concerned I'm getting off track, but this is actually part of the love story, the 85-year love story of my mother. So I might as well start at the end before I go to the beginning. One time I was bringing a girl with me to watch figure skating. I brought my parents along in 2001. And at that point, my mom was getting kind of elderly. She wasn't walking very well. It was customary for me, like if she's just wandering around the house, if I feel that she is in need of me, I'd go up to her and just make sure she doesn't fall, or I'd help her. It's just kind of very instinctive. So there we are at the subway station, going to DC to watch the figure skating because my mother and I really love figure skating. In our household, it's football and figure skating, baseball and ballet. Just kind of a strange mix. But, again, she was sometimes walking a little slow. I'd turn around and try to assist her. She scolded me. She said, you take care of Stephanie. She gave me that mad look. She said, I could take care of myself. You take care of Stephanie. And it's like, oh, I am with a young lady. I have to behave a little differently than I do at home. And she scolded me several times. all this to say, and this echoes kind of her values. If I'd gotten married, I know my mom would have sold her house, moved to a nursing home, and been alone. She would not have tolerated that behavior in her son, not to give 100% to his wife. If I'd gotten married, I think it would have torn me to pieces, because knowing my mother would be in a nursing home and she's widowed and she's lonely, and she would not tolerate me spending too much time with her, even thinking about her, I think that would have killed me. I mean, yeah, maybe I could have found a wife that would have made it her priority to care for my mom. But, the Lord has a way of working things out. And I said, maybe God had it in the cards that I might not have been too good of a dad. I probably would have been a distracted husband. I could have been an exceptional son. And it says in 1 Timothy 5:4, says in 1 Timothy 5:4, it's pleasing to the Lord for the children to take care of their parents, especially a widowed mother. And I thought, gee, Lord, how many places in the New Testament did it say something was pleasing to the Lord? And that little passage comforted me, because there are times I just thought, Sal, I totally blew it. My life didn't, it's hard to go to church and see all the married couples there. They look so happy. And I feel like I'm a second-class citizen. Not that they make me feel that way deliberately, but you just feel like they have something I don't. I failed. Yeah. And that verse comforted me. And sometimes the loneliness of being single, I think, just like you're talking about how God came into the flesh and chose to have suffering, and there's that passage where Jesus wept, and he knew Lazarus is going to be resurrected in, just a matter of moments, but he chose to experience human emotion, so much so that he wept. And I said, as lonely as I might feel about not marrying this girl or that, I think my mother felt the depths of despair 100 times more, because the man she loved for 56 years had passed away. God gave me a lot of compassion for my mom because of my loneliness and singleness. I said, oh my goodness, because when I'd look at her, I said, I have nothing to complain about, because, and I mentioned in the description, I'll talk a little bit about C.S. Lewis, but his wife died of cancer. And there's this scene in the movie Shadowland where his wife was confronting him and saying, no, you're not going to be that way, Jack. We're going to enjoy this now. You're not going to worry about the future. The pain in the future, the pain then, is the price of the happiness now. And I was like, yeah, the happiness my mom had, it comes at a cost. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the problem of evil, because the Lord reverses it. In 2 Corinthians, the affliction we have now is the price to pay for happily ever after with him. But we kind of still get the picture that there's a price. The price of happiness is suffering. That is such a Christian. Everyone understands that. But I think 2 Corinthians 4:17 puts that also at a very personal level, because we have like the suffering of Jesus paying for our sins, but it's even also our momentary light afflictions are building for us an eternal weight of glory. And so that is my, yeah. So you're going to make me cry, Rebecca. So
I'm just smiling and nodding. I think it's your words that are making you cry.
Oh yeah. So now looking back, it's like, yeah, Sal, in the world sense, I didn't get what I dreamed of. But 1 Timothy 5:4 moved me to feel like God put me where I needed to be. I needed to comfort. It says true religion is caring for widows and orphans in their distress. And so not only was I caring for my mom because she's my mom, according to 1 Timothy 5:4, but according to James, to comfort a widow in her distress. And, I don't regret a minute. So that's a little bit, that's, again, the part of the love story there, that God provided someone to care for my mom when her husband went home to be with the Lord. Do you have any comments? I saw you flash some questions.
I did. I wanted to put this comment up here. Zane says Sal is a saint to look after his mom for 18 years.
Well, thank you.
Nidamos said, does Sal ever want to have kids?
Not in this world. I think the instinct to have children, but when I see just kind of how this world is kind of going down the tubes, it's kind of scary. So it's actually a yes and no. I love children, but I think I'd probably worry to death every moment over their welfare. I don't think I could handle that well. Some parents can handle it. I have friends that have lost children and they still go on. I don't think I could do that. So thanks everyone for the questions and kind words. So I need to go grab some Kleenex, but I'm going to show something in biology. If I'm going to share my screen, and these are courting rituals. So we're going to talk a little bit about romantic love because it's going to relate to my mother and father and their relationship. I've said that there are some things in Christianity that are variants, that are opposed to feminism. But even before we go there, let's just look at the world of male and female in nature. So I'm going to share my screen. The audio works best if we both shut off our mic when it's running.
Okay.
So, and we don't have to watch the whole thing.
The sound is good, by the way.
I don't think my computer can handle this. Let me try another computer. Just 1 second. I don't want to totally quit on that. I have a faster computer right here. That's why I have a backup.
Yeah. So do you want me to bring the backup up?
Let's see. I may not need it, but it's saying it needs to install a driver first. So this is a good time for any commercial breaks or announcements. I'll be right back.
All right. Well, I will just say hi to everyone and Merry Christmas. And I wanted to put this comment up here. Nidamos, you said, isn't another way to interpret 2 Corinthians 4 that no matter what you chose, that would be your lot and you'd be able to get through it. That's how my church got me to start popping them out. Is that what do you mean start having children, Nidamos? I would love to understand this further. I'm trying to look and see which verse you're talking about here. Though I guess it's the one about the light and momentary troubles. Let's see. I don't see how that. Okay, therefore we do not lose heart, though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. I don't see how that can apply to having children, but Germania says, "What in darnation is going on here?" Well, we're having a little we're having a technical difficulty, but Sal is going to be sharing something about his parents and their story and romantic love and how that relates to the Lord and his love for us. So that's what's going on here. And Nidamos gave me a response, basically that no matter what the difficulty, you'd be able to use God to get through it, to show glory. Yeah, well, life has difficulties, whether you're trusting in God or not. So, but I think what that verse is saying is that when you do have difficulties, when you do have suffering, just know that there is something that is so glorious that is going to come even from those bad moments. And there's something so special about every moment in life.
Amen.
And so whether in the joy or the sorrow or the trouble or the suffering, there are beautiful things to be experienced in life now and the glory that is going to come in the kingdom of God. And God never forgets any of the troubles that you suffer. And I think he has a plan to make something beautiful from everything we experience. I don't see how that relates to having children, but
Well,
I would
if they're
say
momentary
this.
light afflictions.
I guess so. You know what? I will say, that having children is so wonderful. It is so hard when you're especially in the toddler phase, which I know Nidimus is right now. Um, so yeah, it's but it is so wonderful. And my kids are teenagers now, and I don't regret the time and the effort and the troubles that it took to raise them.
So
Mhm.
I'm going to cover 2 Corinthians 4:17 more in detail. So I'm glad you gave your take. I'll give mine, because when I'm sharing the gospel, it's like that verse keeps coming up, because we live in a tough world. It's like, how can God love us? How does this make sense? Because the problem of evil is deep. So you'll get my take, and I'll actually use the love story of Snow White. It's an archetypal one. But in the meantime, I have at least one bird video ready. It's only like 50 seconds, so we'll be quick. It's on the backup computer, and I think I shared it. Is it not coming up?
Nope. I don't see your backup computer anymore.
Okay, let me see. How did I bail out? Let me try again. So forbearance to thanks to everyone for their forbearance as we work through these challenges.
Yeah, but it may not be worth it, Sal, because you said you have a lot of material. So, I mean, are the bird dances essential?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually worked we'll cut out the other parts.
Okay.
We'll cut out
Cameron.
we'll
Okay.
cut out a lot of parts just to make this work. So
Cameron.
you see, I'm not going to go down the path of probably what everyone's expecting. I'm going to take lots of unusual turns. So this will be an unusual show, and it's not going to run anywhere probably like anyone expects. And because
Wow, really? You're going to surprise me?
Yeah, I have
Cool.
surprises. See, if I just gave a talk like every other Christian, this would be boring. I wanted to put something really special. So,
Okay.
oh,
But Cameron said he says I'd be interested in hearing his response to my problem of evil. And Cameron, actually, Sal and I have already talked about. Sal is going to come on and share his thoughts about the problem of evil specifically. And I would love if you send me your thoughts about the problem of evil, and then maybe we can include that in Sal's response.
Okay, do you see the? All right, here we
Yep.
go.
Okay.
This is a picture of intelligent design here. And so that's a Vogelkopf. That's the male. And he has ornaments. And this is a courting mating ritual. He's trying to attract a female. So the theme of tonight is a faint heart never won a fair maiden. So there are certain roles that the male, and there's the female. So he's trying to court her. And you'll just see this everywhere. You could just watch this and it's like, okay. See, that's how he's trying to woo her. He's making a display and he's trying to woo her. Of course, he gets rejected, but then, you never know if, see, he's crying out to her. It's really amazing that you'll see this throughout the animal kingdom. So many human behaviors are reflected in the animal kingdom, both the good and bad and kind of the scary, and then also the beautiful. This is kind of one of the examples of the beautiful here. What I'm trying to point out is God wired males and females a certain way. And, it's fashionable, unfortunately, in my opinion, that they're saying, oh, this is just cultural or a construct. I'm just like, no, this was not created by the birds. The way that they behave, this ritual was created by God. Male and female are beautiful in the way that they interact. I mean, it's just so carefully designed. She won't be attracted to any other species of birds like this because he's designed just for her. So that's really all I had for that. But you'll see this theme again. It's like, that we can say that this is a picture of romantic attraction that's even in humans. And I'll say, is that like not by God's design? Is that like an accident? You can take that one down, Rebecca. Thanks. So, I can't hear you. You can also, thanks.
There we go. Mm-hmm.
What did you think?
That's really beautiful.
Exactly. So when you read the Song of Solomon, and it's been kind of hard for the church, it's like, what do we do with that? It's because I'm not going to read. I mean, some of it is like even too graphic for me. And I like, you have the guy admiring the girl's anatomy and vice versa. But you saw that with the birds. He's just kind of making a display. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what do I do? But if you think about it, this is something of God's design. And I, so let me talk a little bit about, in the church, that sort of thing is frowned on because really, unfortunately, it's associated with bad. You have things like premarital intimacy that shouldn't be there. You have adultery. You have divorce and then remarriage to, maybe, like John the Baptist was getting on Herod's case because he married his brother's wife and said that's not lawful. And so usually the romantic attraction is denigrated, and it's like they say it's also superficial. That's not real love. But then it's like you can't run away from the fact that it's wired in biology throughout all of creation. The theme of male and female is there. So how does this relate to a faint heart never won a fair maiden? God has a picture in biology of a special role for a male versus females. Think For example, if you had a herd of 100 cows, 50% males, 50% females. What wouldn't work is if we killed off 49% of the females and you only had, 49%, and they were all females, and you only had one, say 49, and the ones you killed off were the females, and you only had one female left and you had 50 males. That would not be very productive for the herd. However, the reverse, if you killed off 49 of the males, left only one, and you had 50 females, that would perpetuate. And this is known by biologists. Now, they take their evolutionary spin on it, and I don't. I'll have some comment on that. What does that mean? It means the males are expendable. We saw that instinct for the male to sacrifice himself is deeply embedded, not only in human biology, but that's a theme throughout, like, all biology where there's male and female. And it says in Ephesians, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. The idea that we see in biology is the female must be protected above all else. The male is expected to give his life for her. And I've wanted to have a discussion with some people that say, oh, we want males and females to be identical, basically. They don't want to say that, they say equality. But the idea that there's specialization, I'd say, okay, let's consider the Titanic. There weren't enough lifeboats on the Titanic, sadly. And it came to the realization some of us are going to have to die. Who's going to die? The husbands chose to die. Now, Rebecca and I had a little conversation backstage, and she rebuked me properly and said, Sal, it sounds like you're saying women aren't courageous. I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply that. Because my mother, who had to live 18 years without the man she loved, I think that's a different kind of courage. I don't know that I would want. If I lost someone that I'd been partnered with and I loved that deeply, I don't know that I'd want to live. She had to have a lot of courage to face 18 years and to find a reason for living. One of those was me. She was praying for her wayward son to straighten out. God bless her. And she was praying for her family that had all sorts of kind of the normal problems. So I don't view that the women are any less courageous. They're differently courageous, because that takes a lot of courage to say, I'm going to live without my husband. I have to carry on. I have to carry on the role of being, basically she has to fill his shoes. And that also takes a lot of courage. But you see, there's a defined role. And you just see this in the animal kingdom. I mean, you can't kill the female. She has to live. The male has to sacrifice his life for her. And it's just amazing that in Ephesians that the Apostle Paul describes the role of the male in terms of Christ. And what I'm saying is, when you see this throughout all creation, that's a theme of Jesus dying for us. And there's something very interesting. Evolutionary biologists, there are numerous kinds of problems, but one of the biggest problems is the fact of gender. Because from a metabolic standpoint and all the things, and you could see, like with the birds, there's a lot of metabolic energy expended just in the courtship ritual. And the evolutionary biologist said rightly that this shouldn't be selected for. In fact, Darwin said when he saw stuff like this, specifically the peacock's tail, the peacock is very well ornamented. And so the peacock goes in front of the female. The male the peafowl is the species of bird. The peacock is the male of the species. And he has this very beautifully ornamented tail. And the way he courts is he goes in front of the female, turns around and shakes his rear end at her. And if she looks at him and said, what a great tail, and that'll be her partner. And Darwin saw that and said, this destroys my theory. And he came up with another theory and subject to another talk, he said, people have said that his idea of sexual selection doesn't work. It's failed theory, even though, like a lot of theories, it persists in academia. But he said that shouldn't be there because that makes the male very vulnerable to predation, being killed makes him a great target. And it's very wasteful to have such a ornamented tail. And you're like, well, you see, evolutionary biologists said males are kind of useless. males are kind of useless. Why do they exist? And I was like, it would make sense if biology was not meant, it's not all about survival. It's meant to glorify the creator, and it's meant to tell a story. It's meant to tell a story. So if you have any comments, I'm going to go back to the slideshow.
Cool.
So I'm going to share some pictures, and I'll relate to how this related to my dad. So back to the slideshow. So I actually stumbled on this. I stumbled on this when I was looking for a picture that conveys faint heart never won a fair maiden. And so here, this theme is echoed. This is very archetypal, where you have, and it says in the caption, you can find this on Wikipedia on the topic of courtship, which is actually another topic I'm going to have to cut out in the interest of time. The knight there is going off to war. So this is not exactly the fairy tale where the maiden is swept off her feet by the knight because she's just so in awe. This is actually a little bit heartbreaking because the knight might not return. He's going out there to fight war. He's expendable. He is laying down his life for his country, for the cause, and for his wife. And she's bidding farewell. The handkerchief or cloth there she's tying around him is kind of an emblem representing her. And this will be there's an interesting passage in my dad's diary. I just realized it, where he talks about a handkerchief. So that is her marking on him, her love and well wishes. And this is really kind of heartbreaking when you think about it, because, it's not typically, it's romantic, but in kind of a very tragic way. So the faint heart never won a fair maiden. He is going off to do his duty as he's willing to die for her as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. This is just written throughout all biology. So let me now it says God is love. And I'll say to properly glorify love stories is to glorify God. I'm not talking about, when I say properly, we have to kind of filter out kind of a lot of the bad, because romantic love is so polluted now that most of the time it is kind of unfortunately bad and in the wrong direction. But that wasn't the model in the Garden of Eden. And I'll say sacrificial love is the most beautiful love. For greater love hath no man than to lay his life down for his friends. That's the word of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Greater love hath no man than to lay down his life for his friends. So now I'm going to share an archetypal love story, Snow White. And this is the rhetorical question I would ask people who complain about, well, if God exists, why would he let all this bad happen? Think of reality as a story of God's love and of other love stories. I posed this question, and no one has actually refuted this one, to my knowledge, at least not in a way that I thought was credible. Would the love story of Snow White, that is, be as beautiful without the evil queen and tragedy in the love story? Another way of framing the thought is agony the price of ecstasy? So let me just walk through this. I'll just cover the story of Snow White. So this is one movie rendition of Snow White here. She's the fairest in the land, and her evil queen stepmother wants to kill her because she's so beautiful, and the evil queen stepmother wants to be the most. That's why you get the saying, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And the mirror would usually say the queen, until Snow White started to grow up and Snow White was the fairest. And the queen, from that moment on, the evil queen stepmother wanted to destroy her. And there's a Disney rendition of the evil queen stepmother and her alter ego, the evil witch. So they're one and the same person. So the queen mother, who looks like a queen, when she looks in the mirror, you see what she really is. She kills Snow White. And then the prince comes and realizes he's too late. But then, she's in a glass coffin, and as they're bringing her for burial, she'd eaten this poison apple. And one of the elves there, you could see the little elves there, bumps the coffin, or someone bumps the coffin, and it causes the poison apple to dislodge. She comes back to life. Now, she comes back to life, and she marries the prince. The evil queen mother attends the wedding, but then the prince takes care of her, and they live happily ever after. You see, there's something about this tragedy. It's beautiful, and the story makes sense because of a resurrection event of sorts, if you think about it. And I stumbled on this I'm not really into fairy tales, guys. But I was just trying to illustrate 2 Corinthians. I said, I could be kind of really theological. I said, no, that wouldn't satisfy my artistic taste. Let me try to deliver the message, deliver it home with a fairy tale. And so the idea is initial tragedy is essential part of happily ever after. Happily ever after is meaningful because of the possibility and existence of tragedy. So just imagine then that you wrote I've challenged people. I said, try to write a love story that doesn't have any tragedy in it, or heartache, or brokenness. It might move some people, but it doesn't move people like this. You could take almost any, as Snow White is a fairy tale, you can take other stories that are probably a lot deeper. But it's the fact that there's tragedy, there's a resurrection event, then happily ever after is more meaningful. And so that is my way of expressing the meaning of 2 Corinthians 4:17 from a human perspective. So there's the affliction and suffering of Jesus Christ on the cross that paid for our sins. But the Christian living in this life is having to deal with all that. Paul is comforting them and saying, this momentary light affliction that you are suffering, in addition to Christ's suffering, is building for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. So there's some, you could take this down for the time being, Rebecca, the screen share. So there's this widow in our church, in my local church, Occoquan Bible. Her husband died of a heritable disease, and her kids, 2 of her 3 kids, inherited it, sadly. They may be terminally ill. What do we say about God abandoning them? And as I and the elders were praying for these 2 children, they're like in their 20s now, the verse that kept coming to mind is, this momentary light affliction is building for us an eternal way to glory. And by the way, this is only for Christian believers. The problem of evil, there's more to the problem of evil than what I just said. there's kind of a larger issue, but at a personal level, it makes sense if you're a Christian. What the Bible doesn't teach is how this makes sense for a non-Christian. The momentary light afflictions for a non-Christian, I have no answer why that would be good for him or her. But for the Christian, this is building for you an eternal weight of glory. So that is a little bit of my answer. I know we're going to do a show on that, and we can still do that because I have like a large presentation. But I just wanted to say, this is what's fun. I began to ponder romantic love, and I said, they're love stories that it would resonate with the average person that give meaning to 2 Corinthians 4:17. So if you have any thoughts, Rebecca.
Well, I love that, because actually, and I don't want you to read the chat, Sal, but I do want to mention that someone was asking about, well, then why did God create Lucifer and all that stuff? And he was asking that before you brought up the, thing about the queen and, I don't think he was satisfied with your answer about that, but I am.
Yes.
I find this, okay, of course, the evil queen, causes problems and all these things, but it is a more interesting story. And I'm not trying to say that, oh, God is torturing us or making us suffer to make the story more interesting. But I think there is, something that is you're sharing here that resonates.
Well, you see, this is the question. And by the way, whoever asked that's very probing, because when I nearly left the faith, I wrestled with this. Why didn't God send Satan to hell before creating Eden? So God makes this beautiful paradise.
Cameron, are you still watching? Cameron, you have to hear this, because this is what Cameron was asking me the other day. And I was like, I've never even thought about that. But now you're here ready to, you were wrestling with that too.
Well, yeah. See, this is why, it's on some level, it was refreshing to talk to atheists, because they had these questions that were in me and were never answered in church properly. And still to this day, like you had the ex-apologist, I said, Rebecca, that was one of the best shows, because that just tells me people are just not getting it. The pastors are kind of just not thinking deeply about what's actually in the scriptures. And, they're kind of, all the theology on theodicy and apologetics, they don't cover this the way it should be, because it's actually in the scriptures. You just have to think about it a little harder, but it's there.
Okay, so why then, answer Cameron's question?
Okay.
Why didn't God just destroy Lucifer before Eden?
And the answer is in Deuteronomy. And see if Deuteronomy 13:4. So in Deuteronomy 13, now remember, the Lord took the children of Israel out of the captivity of Egypt, going to bring them in the promised land. And see if I even quote it here. I didn't, because, here it is. So this is Deuteronomy 13. And God said, if a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder that he tells you comes to pass, and if he says, let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams. For the Lord your God is testing you. For the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. And if you think about this, what do and you talked about my singleness, but this is true of a lot of people. The loneliness I felt was because I was seeking true love. Is God, we're in the image of God. If you just think about this, God is looking for true love. He wants to know that his people love him, that they have true love for him. And Deuteronomy kind of describes this, and I thought about it. I said, God gives humans this beautiful paradise where they could live an eternal honeymoon. And I wanted to show a clip where Adam, kind of in the mist, was taking Eve and carrying her and just twirling her around in the waterfall. It was actually beautiful. I said, that's the way it should have been. God's giving them all that. But he only asked one thing. And it's really funny. There was no sin there. There's no possibility of any sexual sin. I mean, there's not going to be any adultery or fornication. There's not going to be any pornography. None of that. God made it such that there was no way they could mess up except one way. And that was to eat the forbidden fruit, which I think it was a literal fruit, but the real sin was their heart. They wanted to be God. That was really offensive to the Lord. That meant they didn't love the Lord their God with all their heart and all their soul. True love is not a love that is forced upon people. It is a love that is voluntary and it's tested. So we tend to think, oh, gee, the Lord messed up because we're so miserable now. You see, we're looking at it from our perspective. God has his priorities. His priority was to find people that love him. It may be kind of hard to comprehend this, but it's just like when I exterminate a cockroach. My priority is higher than his life and his welfare. I mean, the cockroach might think I'm the most evil, dastardly, being in creation for spraying him with pesticide. Okay, I get that. So we tend to frame the problem of evil in terms of what is pleasurable for us, but that's not the ultimate goal of the universe. The goal of the universe is the law of God. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength. As much as we are searching for true love, God is as well. And that's why, even though he could have thrown the devil into hell before making the Garden of Eden, God gave Satan the chance to make his sales pitch to humanity. And it was only when I was, just a passage you wouldn't think of. I've asked around, I said, how many of you tried to explain the problem of evil with Deuteronomy 13? I think I'm the first one. And I said, God, I need to get this out. It's right there in the Bible.
Yeah. Well, I think some people may have a problem with it though, Sal, because it sounds like God's
kind of harsh. Yes. You can either resent him for it or you can fear and tremble. Jesus said, blessed is he who's not offended with the message. I mean, okay, let's say you don't like my answer. What do you think about Deuteronomy 13? I mean, let's just back this up. If you didn't like my explanation, how do you react to this passage? God's going to allow these false prophets to come in there and they're going to sin and then invite more judgment on themselves. It's the same thing, but just back up a little bit. It's like, that's kind of mean of God. He's deliberately going to let stumbling blocks kind of be there and give them a chance to sin and be judged and suffer all these terrible things. Because if you go to the later chapter of Deuteronomy 13 and he's reading all these pronouncements, what he's going to do, where there's going to be cannibalism because they're going to be starving so bad. It's like, gee, that's kind of mean and nasty. My answer to that is, I can understand why you're upset. Just like when I exterminated that cockroach. He didn't like me doing that because that's saying, I think my priorities are better than his. And I know that sounds kind of mean and nasty. And I can understand why he would not like me for exterminating him. And, but from a logical standpoint, if you're God, you're number one. You're the number one priority in all reality. You can do what you want. So But the thing is, for the Christian, God is inviting you. He sent his son to say, hey, yeah, God is really wrathful and he has an agenda and he's going to be number one, but he's willing to die for you. He's willing to die for you. What do you say now? Because now all of that is going to be made up for. And this is really hard because you could put this one. I could do a stop screen share so I could. Oh, all right. When I was sharing with the atheists, just trying to get to know them. I didn't really preach very much. I wanted to be a listener, and I encountered this girl who confessed to I and some friends of hers. She was just in tears. She said she'd been assaulted. And, I'm trying to be family friendly here. You know what I mean? And it just hit my heart. I said, Lord, how do I tell someone like that she's really seeking about the love of Jesus, because this horrible thing has happened to her, and horrible things have happened to all sorts of people. 2 Corinthians 4:17. How good would heaven have to be to make up for something that bad? You'd have to say it'd have to be pretty good. And the Bible teaches it's going to be even better than you can possibly conceive. I mean, how good would heaven have to be to make up for all the bad things that you didn't deserve, like that girl? There's really no way humanly to possibly describe it except just to say that, because we can't conceive of something that good that would make up for that amount of suffering. And Jesus offers us that. So, that's the thing. It's human nature to say, hey, we know better because I'm just like that cockroach. The universe has to revolve around me. And anything that doesn't revolve around me and causes me suffering, like Sal exterminating the cockroach is feeling like, you monster. It's like, well, the difference is between me and that cockroach is Christ died for me. I didn't die and become a cockroach for the sake of that cockroach. Only God can do something like that. And he's pouring out his love. And he can make something. That's another theme that is in the New Testament. God is glorified by taking something that's a wreck and making it beautiful. If you think of how a flower grows, it takes the soil and the dirt and water, and it blossoms into something beautiful. God can transform something that's ugly into something beautiful. And, it's like, okay, I'm not going to sugarcoat this, that, a lot of people are saying, well, you have to try to make God look like Santa Claus. I'm like, no. When the gospel was preached in the New Testament, people feared and trembled. And they threw themselves at the mercy of God and said, Lord, have mercy on me. Like that thief on the cross said, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And some bad things were going down that day for him. You may not like the hand you're dealt. And I get that. It's really kind of hard that there's some people that are not Christians. They tell me about their children dying and they have to live without their kids, and, all sorts of stories there. I get that. And they, a lot of them are just very bitter. It's like, well, that, I get that. And people ask me, well, how can you love someone like that? How can you love a God that is, if you think about it, he's number one. Everything else is not as important. How can you love a God that makes himself number one, the priority of reality? And it says in the Bible, we love him because he first loved us. And sometimes I say, I don't know why. I just do. And if for nothing else, I don't love what the non-Christian world has to offer me. Not one iota. I mean, I've been tempted. I mean, there are days out, the cross is a cross to bear for the Christian walk. But I'd say in some, no, I'm not going, I don't want to go there. I don't want to serve the quote unquote God of atheism. There are no answers in atheism. Rebecca, you're so silent. I don't want to be.
I'm listening to you, Sal. This is great.
So
I agree with you totally.
Do you like that?
There's no answers anywhere else. And I mean, for me, like, there's nothing that this world has there's nothing this world has to offer that compares to knowing our Creator. I mean, this is amazing. There's nothing. And so, yeah.
So I'll share, there are just so many things if you look at the story. So God let the devil come into the Garden of Eden. But you see, this is also archetypal. God ends up being the hero that crushes the bad guy, the villain. You just see this. So God created the world, and he knew that, okay, there would be a devil there, and, he sinned, and then Adam and Eve sinned. But God's so powerful, he could turn this around, and it's to his glory. Why do we have this show called Flip or Flop? Do you ever watch the HGTV?
Not too much, but I've seen something like it. Yeah.
Okay, so what do they seek out? They seek out a house that's a wreck. And the reason it's compelling is the flippers, the house flippers, are demonstrating their skill and ability to take something that's a wreck and make it beautiful. So that thief on the cross, he's dying. He made a total wreck of his life. By the way, it's probably one of my favorite passages in the New Testament because, I can lament about all the bad things that happened to me, but the things that I really lament are the self-inflicted wounds. It's like, man, that's really hard. That's a tough cross to carry. It's like, man, how I've messed up. And that story resonates. And Jesus is saying, no matter how badly you messed up there, Sal, no matter how badly you messed up, thief on the cross, today you'll be with me in paradise. I can transform this into something better. Eternal life, the resurrection and eternal life make sense of the problem of evil on so many levels. And that's just one example. And I'm just like, I didn't get this taught to me in church. Not in this kind of detail. And we have the themes of, Jesus did talk about the passage, truly I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Whoever loves his life loses it. And whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. So yes, man sinned in the Garden of Eden, and the honeymoon that was supposed to last forever is now over. We bear our cross each day, and we have to carry it and deny ourselves. It's like, that's no fun, and I get that. But Jesus is promising you'll keep it. Whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. And he uses the analogy of seeds. Again, we know, we creationists, we just marvel at the science that, again, the Christian themes are just throughout nature. I don't think that's an accident. So, you have like dirt and logos, which is in the genome and the cells of the seed. There are things. Roses actually have seeds. That's why I showed it. It's called a rose hip. I don't know why they don't call it a rose seed, but there's it right there. It goes into the ground and it can make a rose. Jesus is the logos, just like the genome. It's planted in us and it can transform us in the next life. It starts to transform us in this life. I covered a little bit about, in another talk, I'll talk about self-destructing designs. There are all sorts of things here. So, sorry. This is a Rube Goldberg machine. I don't know if it's gonna. Let me just try to play it and see if it'll let me get away with it. No, it's not going to work. Let me go to the backup computer, Rebecca, because this will touch on why God wants. We tend to think of the intelligent design as for our glory. It's not. It's for God's glory. Oh, great. Oh, did I not put on the audio? Let me stop sharing and I'll put on the audio. Apologies. Hang on. So I'll stop the share. Let me reshare here with audio. I'm sorry, Rebecca. Oh, Rebecca, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Ah! I was just thanking all the people who are watching. Zhang and Nidimus, Janet, who else? AJ,
Well, Merry
Jesse,
Christmas to you all.
Cameron. Thank you guys.
So this is just like a 2-minute video.
Okay.
All the philosophers who are criticizing Christianity, they tend to define intelligent design as good and bad in relation to them. And I need to show this to kind of get the perspective flipped. The reason things exist is not for the benefit of the created, it is for the glory of the creator. And you'll really see this with Rube Goldberg machines. And this is, by the way, Rube Goldberg machines are talked a lot about in intelligent design. You can stop.
Okay.
What do you think about that, what you just saw? I'm asking so that maybe I can clarify why I actually saw it.
Well, I guess maybe it's kind of presenting the idea that things have results, like one thing can trigger another thing and another thing. And so kind of separate, like figuring out what the conclusion will be
Okay.
with everything that we go through. I
I
mean,
think
is this what you're trying to get to, or what
not
was
quite,
what?
and that's why I asked, because
Mhm.
the real point is, why would we make such a silly contraption like that in the first place? Is it for the sake of the contraption, or is it to show the ingenuity of the designer that he can put something that just so barely works,
Mhm.
but it does? It's just like someone walking a tightrope. Why does he do it? Because it's just like so improbable. And you'll hear the theme of improbability in intelligent design. Things are just taken. It's just like building a house of cards. Why would we build a house of cards? It's not for the
I
sake.
don't know. It's so frustrating.
It's to show your, basically it's to showcase our ability. We're just kind of amused. I mean, people do it, all right. So being an engineer, it's like, well, why do you build certain things? It's like, well, it's like we'll say, oh, it has purpose or whatever. It's like, I think fundamentally a lot of us will say it's just because it's fun, just to show what we can do, what our mind can conceive and put together. It makes us feel good. Do you compose songs, by the way?
No.
Or, but you write,
Mhm.
or there must be, or you cook, or
Well,
you
I
do
wrote
something.
a book, but I don't sit around and write except responding to comments on YouTube.
Okay, so let me just say, as an engineer, and there's an element of being an inventor, and sometimes you just want to build something. And I
Mhm.
talked about self-destructive designs. We have fireworks. The firework could complain, why'd you make me self-destruct? It's like, well, no, you weren't made for yourself. You were made for me, the designer.
Mm. Mhm.
And I'm just like, okay, so you see this world, it's self-destructing. God has taught us in his word what the ultimate goal is. It's to glorify him, that he could take this miserable world and flip it. And just, I mean, that is, you know, there's so many levels to this. We can't cover it in this space of time, but we tend to think, oh, this is bad design because it's hurtful to us. And it's like, well, that's like a firework saying, hey, this is bad design because I'm self-destructing. It's like, it may sound kind of cruel and you may not like to hear this. And I know a lot of anti-theists have said they will not serve a God that puts himself first above us.
Well, I do think there's a valid objection here, and I'll just put up, this is
Sure.
Nidamos says, man, that is so wild against our moral intuitions. All the rapes, murders, miscarriages, the flood, then Holocaust, the 400 years supposedly of child sacrifice, all part of the game.
Yes. You read Deuteronomy and the prophecies, it'll make you sick. There is a passage where God says, because you sinned, your wives are going to be ravaged. I mean, that's a very polite way of saying raped. Because you serve these idols, the invaders are going to come into this land. They're going to take your women and they're going to do that to them. They're going to take your pregnant wives and cut their wombs open. I mean, the whole test, that's why sometimes I'm just like, okay, we can try to sugarcoat this and say God is really nice. He really is kind of, he doesn't really want to do this. And it says in Deuteronomy, as I delighted to bless you, I will delight in destroying you. And I'm like, how do I apologize for that? I just like, well, you don't. You'll drive a lot of people away when you read the Bible just as it's written. So the atheist tactic in a debate is to say, boy, God just seems like this awful ogre. How can you persuade us that he's that good? And what I'll say is, you're judging God in terms of human wishes and desires. What you have essentially done is said, if things don't conform to the way you want, you'll reject it. you have then placed yourself in the place of God. Do you not realize that when you say you are the number one priority, and I get that, we all care for our kids. And for the record, just in case you think this doesn't hit home, you can look up an article on Connie Reyes in the 1990s. There's this social worker who was raped and murdered. She was my aunt. So, I think all of us have stories in our lives where we could be really, really bitter. And I could say, okay, I could walk away and say, this is so terrible. I'd rather go to hell than serve the Lord. I mean, that's what some anti-theists have told me. And I was thinking, I could make that choice. I chose not to. I said, I could reject him or I could accept him. So some anti-theists said, even if you had all the evidence, Sal, we'd rather go to hell than serve the Christian God. That is, that's something I'm not going to try to persuade you one way or the other. It's your soul. It's not mine. I've chosen to give my life to God. And I think a lot of Christians that make that decision have to face that God is allowing some pretty terrible things on this earth. And they have chosen not to let that get in the way of them receiving God's forgiveness and acceptance. And I'll tell you, probably one of the hardest things, and I don't know any way to console someone. Some people that decide to accept the Christian faith, they realize then, gee, my mother and father were not Christians. If I accept this as true, that means my mother and father are suffering for eternity. And I have friends and relatives, they have children lost that were not Christians. And I'm just like, man, it's like, Lord, how am I going to share the gospel with that? Because they may have to come to terms with that at some point. That's why Jesus said, he who loves his wife, loves his children, loves his mother or father, the implication loves anything else more than him is not worthy of him. And I thought, Lord, that's kind of harsh, You got to put, that's when God was testing Abraham. What does he do? He said, sacrifice your son. I'm just like, yeah, the Christian calling is pretty high. And sometimes I think evangelical churches are so eager to get converts. They don't tell people accepting Christ, you got to count the cost. You got to count the cost. And it's like, for me, it's like, there have been days it's like, Lord, I don't think I have it in me. You got to give me the strength. Send people my way that can help me through this. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to sugarcoat how cruel God can be. I mean, as sobering, as hard as this may sound, my pastor used to say, okay, you see all that God allowed? That's just a warning sign. That's a warning sign of just what his wrath will be on after Judgment Day. So you complain about, the rape and starvation. The Bible teaches it's going to be a lot worse. In the New Testament, it said that when Paul was sharing the gospel with Felix trembled, shook physically. I think something in Felix's heart said, this is right. And it terrified him. The other reaction is just hatred of God. And I don't know what to do about that. Okay. That's something that if you become a Christian, you're going to have to deal with, and that's probably something I haven't completely figured out. All I could say is for myself, I want the forgiveness that Jesus offers.
Amen. So where
Merry
where are
Christmas.
we in the
Um,
where are we in the romance talk? You're on mute.
so now I'll finish it because it'll be quick now because I've essentially outlined a faint heart never won a fair maiden. So I'll just so the archetype is Jesus Christ. My father was merely kind of an instance of that, as they to use computer science terminology. Oh, here again is the peacock. Oh, if you could share my screen on there. Talked about courting rituals. We showed that earlier, and I said how the males are equipped to win the fair maiden, even in all levels of biology. This is the same picture. Now, just briefly, people say, oh, there's an evolutionary explanation to that. And I'll say, it may look like the correct explanation, but you see, evolutionary biology is like this pencil in the water. It looks bent, but it's really not. You can come up with a theory that the pencil is actually bent, but it would be wrong. Evolutionary biology argues kind of fundamentally that life is not designed, and it's it looks like the right explanation with all the phylogenetic diagrams and all, but it's fundamentally wrong when you examine it in detail. So the pencil is not actually bent, and likewise, life is not actually evolved. It just sometimes looks that way, but it's not. So just as this pencil is actually straight and not bent, life is not evolved. It just looks somewhat like it's evolved, but it's not. You look at all the things in detail, as I've done on my channel and trying to do a little bit on Rebecca's, you'll realize it's the wrong explanation. It's designed. So the courtship, I was going to read this Wikipedia article. We'll skip it. It's actually kind of beautiful. It makes a distinction between courtship and dating. And the reason I showed the birds, I said, was Adam and Eve, was that love at first sight? And I'd argue in the Garden of Eden, that was the way it worked. Should have been love at first sight. But we live in a fallen world. That's probably a bad thing now. This is my father, Angelo. At 1946, he'd be 20 years old. And I'll show a picture of me and him side by side at some point. This is his war diary. Now, let me pull out the diary here. You can see the diary is very thin. It's not a big book. And it began in May 17th, 1942.
Wow. Amazing.
His last entry was 2002. And the amazing thing is he was an accountant. And so a lot of major things were just almost like another accounting entry. So he'll talk a lot about things that are not as significant as other things, but they'll be just kind of like entries in the diary. But I
Brian says, was his father in World War II? Wow. And that's what I'm saying too. Wow. And I'm just like so amazed you're holding this diary from,
yes,
so
he may have carried it with him to the battlefield.
That's amazing. Wow.
He may have carried this when I was holding this, I said, when these events transpired that very day, he might have been writing in this book. And I'm holding this book. And he held on to it from 1942. The amazing and this is a little bit more of an aside, but I was like, he kept talking. A lot of the entries were about the parties he attended and the girls he was dating. And I was like, And I realized, oh my goodness, he was only 18 years old. This reads like a teenager. Now, this is amazing because he's in, the Philippines was occupied. The Japanese invaders are there plundering and pillaging and doing all sorts of cruel things, but people go on with their lives. And I realized that's a great quality because otherwise you'd go insane. Amazingly, he didn't have a lot of rants about all the brutality of the Japanese. I don't think I saw very little, if any, of that. And by the way, there's some language used. He refers to them as Japs. I don't mean to be, derogatory. There are some Christian women who are Japanese who attend my Bible study. I just want to clarify, okay? We have thank God for peace now. But I was going through this diary and I was saying, this is my dad. He's only like 19, he's like 21 years old. And like one of the first entries, I talked about that handkerchief in that picture. And he said, visited Deling, that's her name. I hold her hand and took a handkerchief that first night I met her. So you remember that picture? I told you there's that picture of the night and the handkerchief. And it just struck me. I said, you see, there's still a little bit of that chivalrous culture even there in the Philippines. All right. So he goes on a date in January 10th. What's another entry shortly thereafter? He brought Nena and Menchu to Lemol. Those are his sisters, my aunts. He went to Paranik and a fight with the Japs when convoying U.S. ammunition and supplies. Now, this is a very famous battle, actually. This is the landing of the 11th Airborne, like angels from the sky. So he's a guerrilla fighter. This is just amazing that it's so terse. It's almost like, he's an accounting ledger. And so there's highlighted there, Paranik. I'm not pronouncing it right. February 7th, he stayed with the U.S. Army at Tagaytay and Baclaran. And Tagaytay is there's a historical monument there, Tagaytay Ridge. It says here, the site of the first parachute landing in the Philippines, executed by the 511th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 11th Airborne Division, 8th Army USA, under Lieutenant General Robert Eichelberger and Major M. Swing, Major General M. Swing, 3rd February 1945. So Dad was on the ground supporting this action. And it's just kind of, I did not know for a fact that he was actually there until I read the diary just a few days ago. My mom didn't want me to read the diary because there's some private things in there, like about his girlfriends. Sorry, Mom. I'm trying to honor our family. But I mean, I was actually looking, I wasn't looking about my dad's girlfriends. I was looking about this monument here. And here's the monument in the Philippines. And it just kind of, I almost wept when I saw this. I said, Dad was there. He's just a young man risking his life here. And I was reading these entries. There's a picture of a little boy on the horse. That's me. I visited the Philippines. That's in the vicinity of where the paratroopers landed. That's in the vicinity of Dad's battlefield. And at the time I was visiting there, I didn't know. It's only now, like the last 3 days, I realized I was there because I wanted to see the volcano in the back, volcano called Taal. Because as a kid, I was fascinated by volcanoes, like I was with, even more so than dinosaurs. I didn't realize this was the battlefield of that landing. You heard about the Normandy landing. The Tagaytay landing was one that's thankfully unopposed. I could show a picture of the landing. I'll just skip that in the interest of time. And so these are some of the locations he was describing. He said, we went to Canbulang and have a dance 2 nights. And we disarmed Colonel Bayani and raided the camp. So there's infighting between the guerrilla camps. So the Filipinos are fighting against other Filipinos for, you can read about this, it's kind of sordid. But in the middle of the war, they have a dance. And if you see old World War II movies, it's really funny. You'll see the pilots flying out and getting shot up, coming back to base, having a good time, going on. This is just amazing that because he was in occupied Philippines, he's, where you live is where you fight. So you're in a dance one day in your native town, you go out and do guerrilla fighting the next day, not too far away. And I was going through the maps and like, oh my goodness, this is just incredible. And there's that's kind of the city where one battlefield was. And he said, we had an encounter in Banlik, Frezo killed, and Jose Cantilar was wounded. When Dad was giving me, when he was walking me through his diary, one time he sat me down, he said, Sal, I want you to see this. And he only did this a couple times where he turned exactly to that page and to that entry. He knew it by heart. He said, Frezo killed. And he told me, he said that, I could tell he was still grieved. I mean, you can't really gather that because he's not introspective like me. In my diary, I'm very emotional. I'll talk about, oh, this is how I feel. This is how I feel. This is how I feel. Dad's very just kind of matter of fact. But he had grief. He said it was one of the saddest things because the soldiers are dying in his arms. They were under his command, and he said, the soldiers were saying, "Tell my wife and kids farewell." He said very sad. And so that was again just all these cities that he's mentioning in his diary. I had to go to Wikipedia. I said, was it really there? And you're like, yeah. I just had that feeling of authenticity, just drove it home. He said,
wow.
And he writes here, and this is not very flattering, unfortunately. He said, I was in command of the unit that fought in Matang Tubig, where 4 Japs was beheaded. So there's a lot of savagery. Probably under some conventions, this would be viewed as war crimes. The soldiers under his command had beheaded the Japanese. I don't know all the details. Dad said he didn't approve of it, but they were under his command, under his order. They were executed. And not that I should make light of this, but one time Dad was pretty mad at me. He reminded me he killed people. So if I misbehave, just like, yeah, Sal, I could take your head off. And I shouldn't make light of this. This is the savagery of war. But just imagine in the one page he's talking about he held a girl's hand, got a handkerchief from her, met her the first time, and then he's talking about dances, and then he's talking about the warfare that happened here, where all that happened was Matang Tubig and other, these are just like, this incredible. The Wikipedia has all these locations where Dad fought. And February 17th, Japs surprised attacked us in Kanbulang. We fought from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Many civilians killed. Duran and Ernesto, and I can't pronounce the last name, was killed, but not killed. Scratch that. They were wounded. And that is a significant portion. No question that Dad had courage. Fast forward to after the war. I could tell that he went back when he was rereading his diary. He's trying to figure out, when did he go out with my mother? And so you hear him talking about his broken engagements, the wedding proposals that were turned down, meets the mother. And even in his matter-of-fact way, you could tell, oh my God, she's special. I could just sense that in the diary, just the way he talked about her. And so it looks like, now they knew each other as children. They weren't really even as far as I could, Mom always used to say he was the ugliest and the poorest of them all. Now he had a rich father, but the dad didn't give him any money. Mom would always quip. He was the ugliest and the poorest. He was poor because his dad was rich and was just a real miserly person. And it says here, November 1st, I had a date with Esther, so that must be his first rate, in the New England hotel, in New England Hotel Street, went to church, went on a date, went to church. He may have gone to church with her. I may go back to the calendar to see if November 1st happens to be a Sunday. Good on him for that. Now, he gives us thoughts on the guerrilla war. He was a guerrilla there. And that is my mother and father with my sister Elizabeth. She was the firstborn. So this is the two of them. But
wow.
I skipped and I didn't say, fear, faint heart, never won a fear maiden. So he comes back home. He's a war hero. Now, in the Philippines, it's kind of corrupt. People abuse power. There was a lieutenant, I believe, in the Philippine Army. He was armed and he was using his position to kind of harass my mom and kind of force her to be his whatever. Practically kidnapping her. I mean, that's just, kind of the thug mentality back then. And I'm not at all condoning it. And Dad happened to be there. He intervened, argued with the guy. Dad was unarmed. The attacker was armed. And finally, Dad said, "You got to kill me to get to her." Now that's my he may have said it in his native language, and that's the best second, that I got what he said secondhand. But that was the essential. You got to kill me to get to her. The attacker relented. So courage won the day there, because Dad had no recourse. He said, "All I'm armed with is my willingness to die." Mom noticed that. And they got married. 1946. I don't know if I thought I was going to post a picture of their wedding invitation. It was beautiful. And so this picture is 1948. You could see the 1940s hairstyle on my mom. That's my sister Elizabeth.
Wow, this is a great story.
See, it makes more sense now in light. You see, this is beautiful because it came from God. That instinct is the picture of Jesus Christ in the relation of my mother and father. He is willing to die for her. So that little girl you saw in that picture, that's the woman in the red dress here. That's my sister Elizabeth. And then that's my sister Veronica here. And you can guess who the little boy is. That's me. That's us in 1966. Our first year in the United States. That's a precious, Dad was so excited to come to the United States. We're like all those immigrants trying to cross the border through all the difficulty, because to us, the United States was a beautiful place to live. They were the people that liberated our homeland from occupation. And so here is father and son. That's my father, Angel, who changed his name to Angelo when he came to the United States, April 1946. And that's Sal in 2000, 54 years later. And I don't know, when I looked at that, I said, hey, we even posed the same way a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, it was a little hard. I had a few hard moments when I was reading this because I really miss my parents. It's hard not to see this and just have that outpouring of love in my heart for them and what they represented. This is my mother in 2012 at my sister's second wedding. Her first husband died, and the African-American gentleman there is her husband. So all the nations are represented. We have people from all ethnicities represented. You could see my mom in the wheelchair there. She wasn't going to be stopped to come to my sister's wedding. And this is Sal and with my mother in 2015. Now, so this is, the love story of mom and dad started when they were children, when they met. They weren't in love, but dad went off to war, like the knight in shining armor, and he came back and he rescued her. And the way the love story ends is she has a son by the man she loved, and he cared for her. Now, I'll try not to break down when I share this part. I think I might. That last month, when before mom went home to be with the Lord, she was lying down in the hospital bed we had set up for her here, and she looked so peaceful. All the family noticed it. I said, come on over. We were under lockdown. I said, I don't think she has much longer. Just come. Don't worry about that, because she may not last anyway. She had this peaceful look on her face. And I said, I think I know what that means, Lord. And there's one time she was lying down and she's looking up. Her eyes were closed and I knew she was asleep, but she was smiling. She had that smile like someone that had finally seen a long lost family member and they're reunited. That beautiful, perfect smile. And it's like, I don't think I've ever seen her that happy. I said, God, no, because I knew what that meant. I knew what that meant. I said, Lord, I'm not ready to say goodbye. I could see it, that even in her heart, she can see that she's coming home. She had that perfect smile. And the night she passed away, I was there. It wasn't completely unexpected. I was just had my stethoscope that, I'd listened to her heart faithfully as I could, as I was caring for her over these 18 years. The last few years, I'd be listening to that heart. And I was just examining because I could hear the lungs had some congestion, and suddenly it went away. And I'm just like, she's going to be all right. I heard her last heartbeats. She stopped breathing. She had that same peaceful look on her face, like she's going home and she's going to be in a happy place. I don't think that was an accident that I saw that look on her face. So people wonder why I'm a Christian. I said, that's an example why. This love story of mom and dad would be a total tragedy if Jesus didn't die on the cross and give us eternal life. My life would be very, 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 very sad, because that means all the love and good times that she had, it's just gone now, totally meaningless. And the very next day, I hope you get to meet Dr. Sandy Pigeon. He comes on my channel a lot. He called me as soon as he got the email, and it's really funny. We did a show Thursday night just like this on a live stream. 24 hours later, within 24 hours or so later, my mother had died. I was expecting her to live. He got the email from me that she passed. He called me right away. And I said, I want to hear from a retired Navy SEAL. You've dealt with death. And he said, Sal, listen up. Your mother's in a better place. Suddenly, just my heart lifted. Your mother's in a better place. So I try not to make this sound sad. Can't help but cry because it's sad for me. But she's happy now, happier than she's ever been. And it made me feel like, I helped her go to heaven. And one thing I didn't tell you, my brave dad, he was kind of on the edge of the Christian faith most of his life. He knew. One story I didn't share is that my sisters, we lived in the third world. They wanted to abort my sisters because my mom had pregnancy complications, life-threatening. at least according to the doctors. And I think they were correct. She had hyperemesis. That's where the fetus causes the mom to just not want to eat, and she'll vomit. She couldn't keep any food down. And they said, you have to abort your kids. Mom said, I'd rather die. Mom and dad agreed she's going to risk her life. So again, it's not that the woman has any less courage than the guy. That big courageous step. Also a big courageous step for dad to say, I could lose my wife in this decision too, both my wife and daughters. And I was an easier pregnancy for my mom because we had a better doctor actually to give mom IVs. But that really moved my dad close to the Lord. And my sisters became nurses. One of them a nurse over 5 decades. But in 1990, around the first Gulf War, my mom was away taking care of my sister who had a surgery. And dad and I were just hanging out, went out to a fast food place. He said, Sal, what does it mean that Christ died for us on the cross? I was thinking, Dad, you've gone to Catholic church for all your life. He said, what does it mean when the priest says that? I don't understand. Can you explain it to me? And you know what? For 10 years, I was praying, Lord, I don't know if he's quite there. Praying fervently for him for 10 years. And then finally, around that time, I was getting dreams that Dad died, and I wasn't sure. And I remember one day driving home from my engineering job because it was bothering me. I said, Dad, I got to tell you about the gospel. I need to know you're going to go to heaven when you die. I shared it again with him. And again, he'd be going to church. And then some months later, we had this conversation. He said, what does it mean? So we went upstairs to his office after that, and we talked. Remember, I've been praying for him for 10 years. And he started sharing. He said, all my friends have died. And I said, Dad, you're brave. He said, Sal, I'm scared. I want to be right with God. All my friends have died. He said, when I was young, I didn't worry about death. We were invincible. That's so much like what you'd expect out of a teenager, okay? When he was fighting the war.
But that's so strange, isn't it? When he's seeing and experiencing death every day and so many of his friends dying, but yet he still felt invincible at that age.
Yeah. Now, I know that it doesn't mean that he wasn't scared at times. You have some teenage boys. I think you probably understand. So he would sometimes scream at night. And I'd say, Dad, what's going on? Did you have a really bad nightmare? He said, yeah, the Japanese it was artillery, and he hated artillery. So it's not that he didn't have fear. He had courage is doing the right thing even when you're afraid. But that's what he said. I wasn't worried about dying. I did. He said he was like in his mid 60s at this point, and he is saying, I want to be right with God. I keep asking about so-and-so, and then I hear he's dead. And I said, my number might be coming up. I want to be right with God. And so I shared the gospel. I had a tract. He read the sinner's prayer, and he thanked me. He said, Sal, thank you.
Wow. So he understood it.
He understood. And he said, you know what? I've been wanting to get right with God for the last 10 years. Exactly the length of time I've been praying fervently for him. And he asked me. And, it's really hard for children to witness to their parents because they know all the bad about you, and you just feel so ashamed. You're trying to be a witness for the gospel. It's like, yeah, I have all the baggage. But Dad approached me. It wasn't beneath him to try to be set right with the Lord, even with his flawed son sharing it. And I'm ashamed of all the times I've dishonored him. But he humbled himself. And just a few days after he gave his life to the Lord for certain, I was reading the passage in Luke, which is a quote from Malachi. The fathers will return to their sons. And that was just confirmation to me that this was ordained of the Lord. And so when Mom was just this year having that look on her face like she's coming home, I'm expecting that she'll see Dad. They will no longer be husband and wife, because that's what the Bible teaches. They're like angels in heaven. They neither marry or given in marriage. But she'll see my father there. And I that's what got me through this. So the love story really does have a happy ending in the truest sense.
Yes. It's beautiful.
And so that's it. I had way more, but I think we'll just end on that note. And thank you for the privilege of giving me a chance to honor my mother and father.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sal. This was absolutely beautiful. And wow, it's just, I hope, some people went to bed, but I hope they'll come back and watch the conclusion, because, it's just so amazing to hear the history with your parents and your dad, and, just like you said, the beautiful conclusion, because the end of the story for us is not the end. The end of their story here is not the end. And, so because Jesus died for us, like, he was willing to die for her, and Jesus was willing to die for us and
Amen.
give his life. Cool.
Do you want to do a solo?
A
You have a
solo?
beautiful. Yeah, if you
Oh
want to
my
sing any
gosh.
Christian hymn, then you won't have to worry about me. Just sing the song that you've been practicing.
Oh my goodness. I I don't, well, I mean, Sal, I have a lot of songs, but I'm trying to think of one that goes with the theme that we're doing right now. So, um the one that comes to my mind is just this one. In his time, in his time, he makes all things beautiful. In his time, Lord, please show me every day as you're teaching me your way, that you do just what you say in your time.
Praise the Lord.
Yep. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you, Sal.